Hi there. Welcome to another edition of TokStocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds. And today I'm lucky enough to have Luke Norman, chairman of US Gold Corp, trades on the NASDAQ with the ticker USAU. Pretty good ticker. Hey, Luke, how you doing today?
Great. How are you, Keir?
Very good, thanks. I'm glad that we could get you on. I know Terry Ann, who does a little bit of corporate development for you. She says you're busy as could be here. So thank you for setting aside a few minutes so we could do a first look on US Gold.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, before we get too far into it, maybe we could do what a lot of people hate. And I'm going to ask you to talk about yourself a little bit. Maybe for my viewers who aren't familiar with you, maybe you could explain a little bit about who you are, what you've kind of done before, how you got into the mining and venture capital space.
Yeah, of course. So I actually began my pathway as an investor in the space in the very late 90s and got a taste of the Brex scandal, and it wiped out a whole bunch of capital. And I was quipping to my stockbroker at the time just how everything's done so wrong on the venture exchange and these guys are all crooks. And he quipped back that if I thought I could do it better, maybe I should do it myself. So I said, I will. Yeah. So I started off actually as a trainee, then ultimately a licensed broker at Canaccord Capital for a very short period of time, sort of between 2000 and 2005. Then I left because I still felt that a lot of the management teams that we were trusting our capital in, and my partner and I over at Canaccord Capital had raised a bunch of money for junior mining companies, and these management teams weren't executing on what they said they were going to do. So I left the business. I went and started really procuring and helping one company in particular. It was called Royal Standard Minerals. And then sure as heck, ran into the same problem, really bad management decisions there. So from that, after the company failed without my direction or input, I came in and I salvaged one of the assets, and myself and Jonathan Ord started a company called Gold Standard Ventures. So, which went on to be, as you know, Keir, a very successful exploration company in Nevada.
Yes.
And so I really stuck with Nevada and focused and honed in my efforts into Nevada and into exploration. And funny enough, that's how US Gold Corp came about. I kind of viewed it as my Gold Standard 2.0. We still have a very large district scale Nevada asset in our portfolio. But with the bear market unfolding the way it was over the last 5 years, we completely pivoted the company away from exploration in Nevada to development in Wyoming. So that's kind of a long, short history on me.
Awesome. Well, I was a shareholder of Gold Standard, did very well on it, used to write a newsletter, and it was one of our sort of picks. And so I was excited to sort of see you back with this. And looks, my gosh, your chart looks amazing. So really interested to sort of dive into the story. So maybe you could give us a bit of an overview on US Gold Corp. What assets, you mentioned you've got a few projects. What assets do you sort of have? Maybe you could give us sort of the quick sort of 1 to 2 minute sort of elevator pitch.
Absolutely. So US Gold Corp is listed on NASDAQ, which is pretty unique. That's because of obviously the history with Gold Standard prior, which was a New York Stock Exchange listed company. We embarked on pure exploration in Nevada, but as I said, pivoted into development. So we have a development stage asset in Wyoming. It is gold and copper. It's a porphyry, tremendous economics there, and it's fully permitted, shovel ready. And we have about a $240 million market cap only today. That's in USD, of course. So a real whole shot, ton of exposure to gold and copper prices, and I think a lot of upside.
How are you finding being listed on a senior U.S. exchange? How are you finding that? Also, looking at your cap structure, which we'll get into, it's a little different than what you normally would find at this stage of company if it was listed on a junior exchange in Canada.
Yeah,
to just explain to people a little bit about the experience you've had, again, being on a major U.S. exchange with a mining and exploration company.
Yeah, well, let's first use again history to show how I ended up being guided onto NASDAQ with this one. Is when John Ord and I did Gold Standard and some other ventures I've been involved in as well. We went from TSX Venture, we built and grew our market cap, and then ultimately evolved onto a senior exchange in the US. And I've done that a couple of times, but what happened very notably on Gold Standard Ventures is we saw this massive shift of US investors into our company. So we ended up, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but I think like 85+% of our investors at Gold Standard Ventures ended up being US based. So when I was offered the opportunity to do Gold Standard, mixing the two names up. That was Gold Standard Ventures. So when I was offered the opportunity to do US Gold Corp, I wanted it just to immediately be listed on a senior US exchange. And the company that was made available to us, because they were looking at getting into privatizing their own business, was listed on NASDAQ. So it's been tremendous. Look, we obviously, as you said, we're going to get into our cap structure. It's very unique. I used that word earlier. Let's maybe get into the cap structure and people understand just what we are referring to.
Sure. Well, how many shares out do you have?
14.3.
That's crazy. That's like a shell. And you have assets, and you got multiple assets, and you got a development stage project. That's wild.
And we've raised in excess of $65 million US in the last 5 years. And, that money's gone into the ground and into advancing the project, obviously. But yeah, it's just minimal dilution during that time period.
Well, we're clearly not talking about a penny stock. What's your stock price trading at approximately today?
I believe we just broke a 52-week high today. We're just flirting with $17 US a share.
Wow. And, one of the things that I think a lot of mining executives sort of talk about when they do have an opportunity to get to a senior US listing is just the power of sort of like US retail, being able to get into like the Robinhood accounts and be able to get. So have you found that despite having a small number of shares outstanding, that you have a large number of shareholders?
Yes, we do. And that's a really good, relevant, pertinent question. We do have a lot of shareholders, which is nice. You want that kind of trading float kind of feel to a stock. You definitely need that to attract the institutions. What's always funny though is people, certainly a Canadian audience, their jaws kind of hit the table when they hear we're $16 or $17 US share price. Yeah, it's just not in the realm of their kind of cognition. However, we still only have a $240 million market cap. I mean, it has not even got close to where it should be, I think, relative to metal prices, etc. So in the US investors love to buy a $10, $15 stock that's going to $50, $60. In Canada, we like to buy a 10, 15 cent share that's going to, 50, 60 cents or a dollar or what have you. It's the same mindset. It's just different variables.
Absolutely. So you mentioned market cap, which is kind of important to consider when you're looking at share price. Don't let share price sort of scare you away. I think you're sort of saying, because of that, why don't we sort of dive in a little bit more into the individual projects? So you've got your flagship project, which is a development stage asset in Wyoming, the CK Gold project. Could you give us a good overview on that? Like what stage it is? Does it have any 43-101 resources? Could you give us a good overview on the project?
Of course, yes. So it in fact has what's called SK1300 and it has a reserve. But we'll get to that. So what's key here is in 2020, we made the pivotal change in our business model to move away from exploration in Nevada and focus in on the pre-development of CK. So by doing so, we needed someone who knew how to dig that hole in the ground, who had a proven track record of building gold mines. You can find every geologist on the planet who claimed they could do it. You need a real engineer and somebody who has a track record. So in August of 2020, George B., that's B-E-E, that's his surname, came in. He was a 16-year veteran of Barrick. He'd built some of Barrick's biggest gold mines on the planet. He came in and joined the company as CEO. Now, the first thing we had to do was establish, okay, what's the economic framework of CK going to look like? So we did some additional drilling, a whole bunch of engineering work, and we established that reserve. The reserve, by the way, is now 1.7 million ounces of gold, approximately, or gold equivalents, of course, because it's gold and copper, but 1.7 million ounces with a heck of a lot more upside to it. Really, what we did is drill constrained ourselves. We did not want to continue to chase mineralization because the next step of the process was find an economic framework and then see if you could permit it. So spending another $20 or $30 million building a much bigger reserve was going to be pointless, fruitless if we couldn't permit the project, of course. Wyoming was a relative unknown for us. In fact, we're the first permitted hard rock mine in Wyoming in 100 years. So we just wanted to tread carefully and see what the process was like. Well, fast forward to today, of course, we're having this conversation, 2025. 5 years later, we are fully permitted, ready to go, shovel ready. Actually, we're just finalizing what's called a definitive feasibility study, just to ensure that we get the lowest rates on the debt facilities that we're going to bring in to start building this early next year. Yeah, that's breakneck speed. And the reason is, Keir, I know I'm getting a bit long in the tooth here, but the reason is the state of Wyoming. Our projects on the state of Wyoming state ground. As such, we dealt with all the state officials through the permit process instead of having to deal with the US federal nexuses such as Bureau of Land Management, Forestry, Army Corps of Engineers. We didn't have to deal with any of them. It was still a very ardent process. It was just a process that could be achieved.
So you're fully permitted. That's excellent to hear. That's pretty unique. That would put you in a pretty small company, like pretty small. I don't think there's too many other peers that would have a permitted gold mine ready to develop. Now, one thing that also struck me, I was going through your PFS, where it breaks down some of the stuff, like what your mine life would be, how much gold equivalent you're going to produce, how many ounces, what your all-in sustaining costs, and what the capex to build. Maybe you could kind of cover off a few of those points if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Like, what's the sort of capex? Is this like $1 billion thing to build, or would it be something a bit smaller?
So that's the very interesting thing about this project, and it does create a little bit of contention, is it's very left on the bell curve, which means we're statistically the lowest cost developer out there that I have seen and many have seen. And that is usually a red flag, right? You think to yourself, all right, well, what corners are they cutting? It's all about the location of the projects. It's about, in the PFS, we have a $277 million capex or construction cost. That number is increasing constantly because we're in an inflationary environment. But I'll be generous and I'll say $350 million to build it. And we're going to have those numbers definitively here in the coming months. So don't get me wrong. We don't just operate off rule of thumb and guesswork. It is, if this was being built in Alaska or in the Yukon or in the mountains of South America, this would be $1 billion undertaking. This project sits 20 miles outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's on right off a paved road. It's right next to the I-80 highway and rail. It's a major resource hub, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Not necessarily everyone watching today is going to know where Cheyenne is, but they do know where Denver International Airport is. You land in Denver International Airport, an hour and 15 minutes later, up the I-25, you're in Cheyenne. We're just spitting distance from Denver. So because of that, we don't need man camps. We don't need to fly in a specialized personnel. We don't need all the storage equipment storage facilities for backup equipment because, 6 hours along the I-80 highway or along the rail line there is the Carlin Trend in Nevada with all the masses of mining equipment that one could require. The state of Wyoming's packed with mining equipment too, mind you. So it really has a massive impact in a good way on the cost of development. So what happens when you have a low cost of development? You have a low cost of production. So very low strip ratio at the project, cost per ounce of production in that pre-feasibility study weighed out at $937 an ounce. And that's an ounce equivalence, of course, because we're selling concentrate, gold and copper concentrate. But as you recognize and know, Keir, that is remarkably low cost of production. Again, it's all testament to that location of the project.
Well, with gold flirting at $3,900 an ounce, even if that increases a bit, your AISC there, that's very, very low cost. Yes, we're seeing things that are obviously a lot closer to $2,000 or even higher per ounce. So that looks pretty unique. Maybe you could just talk a bit more about sort of the style of mining. Is it like an open pit sort of environment? And in terms of sheer sort of metal, does it sort of sway between, is it gold rich or copper rich in terms of the con that you're going to be look to produce?
So I'll reverse approach those questions, actually. Yes, it's the economics are about 80-20 right now. 80% of the economics is gold, 20% of it is copper. However, of course, the copper endowment is larger than the gold endowment. Just the prices of copper relative to gold are quite.
Yes, you need a lot. You need a lot less gold.
Exactly.
It's worth a bit more. It's worth a bit more than those pennies. Those copper.
Yeah, 1.7 million ounces and counting. We can easily see 2.5 to 3 million ounces in the deposit itself, but what we have contained in our reserve right now, and it's exposed at surface. So it is an open pit. In fact, the open pit's going to be operating at about 0.88 to 1 strip ratio, which, again, for those who are not that familiar with that kind of terminology, what it means is we're bringing out way less waste material relative to ore, which is another hugely impactful thing on the cost of production. So a very good strip ratio, and open pit, the most simple form. So all we do is we blast the rock. It gets fed a very short distance to a run of mine pad where it runs through crushing and grinding. And then it goes into what's called a flotation circuit. And from that, a little reagent, which is very similar to a laundry detergent, is added. The metals stick to it, and dried out, it becomes a concentrate that gets shipped off site for smelting. So there's no smokestacks. It's very environmentally and extremely clean mining operation. And yeah, again, the simplification of it is such that it adds to low cost.
Excellent. And oxide sulfide?
It is a sulfide deposit, but a low sulfide deposit. Otherwise, it'd be much, much higher in grade. But the advantage to it being a low sulfide deposit is, for example, which is not the economics of the project, but a waste material, which is a granodiorite that hosts the low sulfide deposit, is so clean that that will be ultimately used as an aggregate source, and not just for roading, but for going under rail lines, rail tracks. They call it rail ballast. And it's a really, really versatile but quite expensive form of aggregate. So that rock will sell for $20 to $25 a ton. And heck, we have 40 million tons of it sitting on surface for free under our mining operations. So we're just starting to toy around a little bit with the economics of that too. When you have 800 million to $1 billion worth of free rock sitting on surface, hey, maybe we should start to count that value as well. So it's a really, really awesome project. Again, couldn't get a better location.
You don't often hear people talk about what they can do with waste rock.
No.
That you could turn into a product and sell it as an aggregate. So that's pretty interesting.
It's not a fanciful kind of a hope or an ambition. We are right off the I-80. We've got Union Pacific Rail rolling through there, but most importantly, the entire Western Seaboard. So California, Oregon, Washington, you can't get a permit to put in a quarry these days. You can't dig a hole. Not in my backyard, I think, is the notional joke that we use in those states. And the same thing is with state of Colorado, which is just 20 miles to our south. So massive, insatiable amounts of demand for that kind of aggregate. So we're not going to get into the materials business, but 2.5 miles away from us is Martin Marietta Materials, who are a $40+ billion construction materials company. So there's a lot of those style big companies in the US that would be interested in that product.
Excellent. So I've had some pretty good luck myself, personally, sort of investing in kind of development, near-term development plays. They're not necessarily getting, 10x returns, but they've been a little lower sort of risk and more predictable kind of returns, especially in this market, because you're getting, as the metal price goes up, while these people have a near-term resource where they can actually take advantage of those metal prices. That's the thinking. What's the timeline for you guys here? Sounds like you got a lot of, it's a very advanced stage project. What's the timeline for like feasibility, getting construction financing, your debt sort of in place, actually started, breaking ground and initial sort of production? What's the timeline sort of look like?
So we've already received term sheets, letters of interest, solid term sheets for wanting to fund the whole project. We are, however, doing it through the correct due process, which is we're finalizing, as you asked, the definitive feasibility. We expect that to be done before Christmas, and hand in hand will be project financing. We're not going to go the arduous route of trying to deal with the INGs and the main banks, where the financing alone would take 18 months. Private capital is very competitive right now. Why? Of course, because we're in a massive bull market. in the metals. So the expectation is definitive finished at the end of the year, negotiating off a suite of term sheets for debt components around the project at the beginning of next year, whilst we break dirt, and it's an 18-month process from start to finish, from when we break ground ultimately to producing our first ounces of gold is about 18 months. You know, we've already signed agreements with Black Hills Energy for power transmission to the site. We're about to start constructing roads on site out to the paved road nearby. We're already really kind of essentially underway with this thing. When you've got, you know, a burgeoning $3,900 gold price, when you've got gold and copper are both critical minerals in the US now, not to mention we also produce silver into our concentrate, again, a critical mineral in the US. You can imagine the excitement and interest around this project is really starting to grow. With the irony being that our market capitalization is still kind of lagging those metal prices and the advancement where we're at with the project, especially when you look at the Lassonde curve and where we stand on that right now. So it's exciting times around this company.
So you think you might produce, again, you know, there's a lot of things that you have to be careful to say, so I don't want to like make you say something you can't, but maybe late 2027, early 2028, you think you'd be producing some gold?
Yeah, I think absolutely those date horizons are more than reasonable. And look, we've given guidance for the last 5 years and been so close with all of it, from permitting, pre-feasibility studies, everything. So I'm very comfortable that from the minute we get the stroke of pen, that's the financing package we are going to take. It's an 18-month process. Now, we've already, for example, put our names on 2 Jameson Cell concentrators that we're going to be using on site. You know, again, the power agreement is signed, amortized to us at 7.9 cents kilowatt hour. Water agreements are all in place. A slew of things been done already.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you got some talented CEO there. Quite a score for you guys to get George, and with his sort of like track record working at a big major, one of the names that's synonymous with gold production globally. So good going there. Now it's almost not even worth it. But let's touch on your other projects. You got a lot of meat on the bone with just that one. Why don't we touch on a little bit like Keystone in Nevada?
We'll just touch on Keystone today because I think by the time I'm done talking about that, your ears will be ringing. Keystone's why we started this company. In Gold Standard Ventures, the project name was Railroad. That's the one that John Ord and I acquired on the South Carlin Trend. We waved our arms for about 2 years telling everyone this is the 4th window on the Carlin Trend. No one wanted to listen. Then when they did listen, that market cap ran from about $18 million to $1 billion at one point. Yeah. Keystone has potentially more potential than Railroad. It sits 10 miles across the valley from the Cortez Trend. From the Cortez Complex, owns the Cortez Complex. It is 60 million ounces and growing. It is their flagship. Now, a recent discovery within the Cortez Complex called 4 Mile, so it's all within that same regional district of the Cortez Complex, has added somewhere around $30 billion of market capitalization to Barrick over the last few months. You know, the metal price helped. Tremendous. Yeah. We own an entire standalone dome of the exact same geology, the same rock package, which is called Wenban, the same multi-pulse intrusives, this huge arsenic anomaly. And in Nevada, by the way, arsenic, where there's arsenic, there's gold. The enrichment of arsenic at this project is actually quite mind-boggling. I've had geologists in Nevada tell me they've never seen a richer set of pathfinders at a project before. So we've got this look-alike little sister to Cortez that's had a few drill holes drilled into it by us. Previously, it looks like we drilled just a little bit too close to the intrusive, but it's got all the air marks. You know, if we don't drill this one in US Gold Corp, we will be spinning this out, and shareholders of US Gold Corp will get a taste of Keystone. So stand by. That project is going to be a monster.
Excellent. So you don't have necessarily a definitive sort of work program just yet on that. I was going to ask, like, what could we expect? It sounds like there might be some bigger conversations afoot.
we don't want to have that overshadow the amazing work that George and our team have done at CK, at Copper King. So at some juncture in this bull market, Keystone is going to see the light of day. And I recommend anyone who has an interest or an excitement around exploration, particularly in Nevada, should become a shareholder of ours.
Excellent. Well, I guess a good challenge for you would be, hey, can you make the market cap of US Gold Corp bigger than Gold Standard? So
Yeah.
a good challenge. That's one you probably want to take on.
Yeah, absolutely.
We won't get into it too much, but you also do have Challis Gold, which is a project in Idaho. It's got a historic non 43-101 sort of resource. Anything that you're going to kind of do with that project this year, or that's
no, it's in hold right. It's on hold right now. We're just doing some permits around plan of operation and all that sort of stuff that's all important for a project like that. In fact, I think the plan of operations finished, but we're just looking at doing some additional consolidation around it. So again, stay tuned.
excellent? Why don't we change gears here? Well, we already talked a little bit on corporate structure, like how many shares are out. What's like insider ownership look like? What percentage of the company is owned by insiders such as yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, whilst the dilution's been kept low, there has been dilution. So obviously, insiders, friends, family, are just around 20% of the company. That's unfortunate, necessary kind of evil of the business. You got to raise money to advance these projects over time. We get diluted, but we are very aligned with our shareholders. So that is why you see such minimal dilution. We're all about wanting to see the share price higher, because the higher the share price gets, the more our shareholders are rewarded for their patience. And it took patience, believe me. It was not a sexy, enjoyable ride when you're doing engineering and permitting. That said nobody is that excited. Those shareholders are being duly rewarded with the way the share price is behaving. And otherwise, you see it all the time on the TSX venture, and it's just a perpetuity of sideways movement, dilution this direction, the market cap increases, but the share price never moves. So we never wanted to be one of those companies, and clearly we are not.
And in terms of, you mentioned you've raised a lot of capital, quite a bit. I think you mentioned about 65 million, if I'm not mistaken. What was sort of the terms of kind of the last round that was kind of done into the company, and how much cash do you have remaining?
Right. So we raised $1 million approximately November 27th of last year. The lead order was a very famous billionaire in this industry, Eric Sprott. Along with him, some long gold funds, long institutions came in. But then we haven't had to go back to the market since, because the stock's been performing so well that we've actually been bringing in a bunch of warrant exercises, including one hedge fund position that I actually inherited as coming in as the chairman of the company. Had about a 1.5 million share purchase warrant that was outstanding on the company, and we managed to bring those in May and June. Those warrants were exercised, and they're no longer on the balance sheet. So, we haven't had to go back to market and raise capital, which is actually, Keir, a little bit of a catch-22. You get yourself in a situation where in this market you actually want to feed the big funds and pay a couple of brokers a fee for doing so, because it brings you to the forefront and brings you to everyone's attention. Well, when we're sitting there quietly just operating off a treasury, we've got over $10 million in the bank still today. All the big ticket items have been done in terms of the engineering and permitting that's been bought and paid for. You don't have to, you come and buy our stock tomorrow. You're not having to enter into that level of dilution on that stuff. The next real step is obviously the mine finance. So a robust treasury. We've not had to go back to market for quite some time, but we're always thinking.
Right. Well, we're in a bull market, and, when the ducks are quacking, you might want to feed them, because, it could turn, and having more cash to advance your business plans is sort of a good one. In terms of other structures, so we talked issue outstanding in terms of RSUs, warrants, options, things like that. What would you sort of add in addition to that in terms of getting those potentially sort of exercised?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't have those numbers in mind, let alone in front of me, but I think it's about 10% dilution through incentive options and RSUs, etc., in the company, which is right in the realm of I think a lot of people carry around 20% coverage in that
Sure.
space, but I think we're right around 10%. And excuse me for not being on top of that.
That's all right. That's all right. And in terms of are there any other large blocks of warrants sort of outstanding related to previous financings, or have you exercised
Well,
most of those?
the last warrant issuance we did was the November 27th of last year, which was a half warrant, and that was at $9, I believe. Might be $9.50, in that realm. We're starting to see some of those sort of trickle across the tape, but otherwise, the warrant coverage is constantly changing on this thing right now because all our warrants are in the money, of course. So we're seeing money trickle in, and those warrants get shifted from the balance sheet from a warrant over to a common share, and it's just slowly picking up our issued and outstanding. But look, at the end of the day, you have to look at these companies fully diluted, because we know that obviously we have a target on our head from an M&A perspective. You pointed out very correctly earlier, Keir, there are so few permitted, ready to go gold and copper mines, or gold mines or copper mines in the US right now, in this smoking hot metals market, that obviously there's a lot of interest in people wanting to own this for themselves.
Awesome. Well, it's a good problem to have. Great for shareholders to be in something that others want. That usually bodes very well, rather than having to try to convince somebody that it's good. It sounds like people are trying to convince you why it'd be a good idea to take you over. So anyways, I'll leave you to navigate that. Why don't we sort of kind of wrap up a little bit? Let's just reiterate some of the catalysts. Thanks very much for a great presentation. What are a couple of catalysts that, as a shareholder, should sort of watch out for over the next 6 months?
There's a big re-rate coming on this company. The definitive feasibility is just getting completed. The financing package is going to be brought together post haste. The re-rate on this company, we're not even trading, in my opinion, even close to where we should be relative to the opportunity in the price of gold. The re-rate with the definitive done and capital in hand is significant again. So there is a heck of a lot of upside. And look, we drop Easter eggs by way of press constantly. When you see us sign the power agreement, when you see us release that we're about to start building roads and break dirt and all these different things, should be a very strong indicator to everyone that this project's moving ahead at very quick speeds, and rightfully so. And
have you been busy doing any site visits?
Yes. I didn't actually attend the last one because I was on crutches due to a back problem. But we have a lot of interest, and the site visits are just so easy. Keir, would love to get you to the site.
Awesome. Love to attend at some point.
We'll arrange it.
Exciting stuff when you can say, hey, this is what's going to go over there, and you can sort of visualize it. Now, do you guys have any sort of formal analyst coverage?
We do. There's 3 in the States, and then we have just got Beacon and Paradigm in Canada have just started covering us, and we're expecting more coverage in Canada in the coming days. So, there's 5 analysts covering the company, and you can find all that on our website or on our presentation on our website, where you can track down those reports. But all of them have pretty impressive price targets on the company.
Excellent. In terms of like macro view, we got gold, which is flirting with $3,900 an ounce. We've got copper, which has been surging, and obviously we've had some bad news in terms of a copper mine that's not going to be able to produce what it's supposed to produce, to shut down. So that's actually made the price of copper sort of go up, which is a good problem for somebody who's developing a copper project. What do you think the backdrop is for like investors here? Is this a bull market we can kind of trust, or is it one that we should still be cautiously optimistic about?
It's absolutely a bull market we can trust, in my opinion. Everyone's talking about a weakening US dollar is the reason why strengthening gold price. That is fair to some degree, but the fiat currency system is 54 years old now. The Bretton Woods was finalized 72 or 71, 72. The amount of ounces of gold relative to the amount of confetti paper that's been printed in the last 50 plus years, gold's just playing catch up on those dollars that are issued, right? As for copper, the very tangible and usable and industrial all important copper. Just look at AI, look to the electrification of the automotive industry. Copper demand is going to soar. The price of copper is going to soar. Own copper. I know I am. I'm diversifying my portfolio dramatically. I have huge interest in copper. I'm so fortunate, of course, with Copper King in Wyoming, a big copper component and exposure there. But I'm increasing my exposure to copper dramatically right now. I think copper is just going to go ballistic in the coming years. So yes, a very real, very tangible bull cycle in the all-important metals, gold, copper, and silver.
Excellent. And just to comment on sort of the backdrop of sort of the U.S. sort of geopolitical sort of climate, we've sort of seen, even though you're not dealing with the feds on your projects and you're dealing at the state level, still it does seem that there's been some improvement at the federal level, and the U.S. is looking to sort of
absolutely try and care, but the problem is you're pushing rope. You can only push rope so far, so far. These bureaucracies have been in place for years, and the people who are in them and running different facets of the Bureau of Land Management, for example, you go into Nevada, there's like 6 different offices of the BLM, and everyone's got a different character there. Some places you just can't get business done. And then you got to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers, which is any of the waterways of Americas. The permitting process, they're trying to fix it, but it's not an easy fix. Here in Canada, it's a disaster, debacle. It is a debacle.
Yeah.
That's a whole different conversation, Keir. We can get into that.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, like, as an investor, you think the U.S. is like a top place where we should be looking? Do you think they're trying to catch up and reshore and have more of their own strategic source of resources?
Yep, it is. They've got a bit of cleanup to do on the permit process, but you got states like Wyoming and absolutely states like Wyoming where you can get stuff done, and Nevada's slipped a pretty fair bit, but it's coming back around. The right fixes are in place, and I think that's coming back around too.
So why don't we end it sort of here? Last message: why should investors consider US Gold Corp today?
Well, if you seriously like gold, if you seriously like copper, and you want exposures to them and you want leverage to them, then you should absolutely consider being a shareholder of a junior mining company. And I know of one in particular that's senior listed in the US that's leveraged to all of them, and that's us. So US Gold Corp, great investment, a well-run, well-managed company listed on a senior exchange in the US.
Hey, excellent. Well, Luke, I really appreciate your time. I hear you've been really busy. We'll let you get on with your day. I really appreciate you giving us sort of a first look on this. I'll be bugging you in a little while for us to do a page flip on it, but excellent job. Looks like a phenomenal company, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Keir. Look forward to future interviews.